Okay, right now we have a conversation with real people with Zinnia, and something I felt about her for a while, for as long as I've known her, which is not a long time, is how much we're alike and how much we're different. I happen to be a white man. She happens to be a black woman, and she did not grow up in the best of circumstances, and I grew up in very good circumstances. So Oh, and by the way, we've lived very different lives, really, professionally speaking and so forth, but we think so much alike. How does that happen? Stay tuned. Okay, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Real People. I am the radical individualist, often referred to as Chip, and this is Individualists Unite. And we're here with Zinnia. Um, we know each other through the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, just as I also know Tim, who also docents there. And as everybody knows, I don't interview just anybody here. My conversations are only with real people. So, Zinnia, are you a real person?
I am a real person, Chip.
Okay. And I can personally attest, she's about as real as it gets.
There you go.
Okay, then. So we've had some conversations. We don't know each other really well, but fairly well. Um, Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you're at?
Well, my name is Zinnia Stewart, but I also go by Zeta Stew because I'm a spoken word artist as well. And how did I end up where I am? I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Mhm.
and I moved to Ohio about 10 years ago. First, I moved to North Carolina, and then I moved to Ohio about
Okay.
10 years ago. But working at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House, how did I end up there? Is through poetry. Working as a poet, creating a network through poetry, and I found out about the opening, so I started working there at the house.
Okay.
But outside of that, ending up in Ohio was just an altogether different journey.
Yeah, because we discussed this because I'm from New England,
Mhm,
Boston area, and we both recognize there's something unique about Cincinnati, or
mhm.
perhaps so unique there's no other city quite like it, um, because of a lot of it, the racial aspect that
Yeah.
Harriet herself discovered by coming here. So yeah, I think we have perspectives that a lot of native-born Cincinnatians don't really have.
Yeah. I think a lot more I'm not going to say we appreciate Cincinnati more, but I think we can find the appreciation because a lot of people who are born here, I think that it becomes like mundane a little bit. They have pride in being from Cincinnati, of course, but when you are a transient, you are exploring the city with new eyes, and you get to know about the rich history from more of a tourist perspective, I guess you could say. So I've found that Cincinnati has been extremely fascinating, and the history of Cincinnati is very fascinating, and it's diverse.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because yeah, I want to go farther with what you're saying there, but yeah, because I came here very young, or a very young adult, and so you grow up thinking you know what's what, and then you go to a different place with different way of looking at things. You go, whoa, wait a minute, you know. So,
Mhm.
and I think you had some of that. I got that impression anyway. Um, so yeah, and I don't want to make this all about Cincinnati, but yeah, what about Cincinnati and diverse and all of that?
What about it is so diverse for me? Even
Yeah.
the way that you like I've been to a lot of different places, traveling through poetry and just traveling in general. And I feel like there is no place I've been that I can't find a part of Cincinnati that reminds me of it. So,
Okay.
and I've never been to any other place that makes me feel that way. You know, you can go down to Eden Park and you feel like you're down in Louisiana somewhere, you know, looking
Okay.
over at the riverfront, and you go into the Indian Hills area, and that reminds me of Chicago, like the suburban areas of
Okay.
Chicago, of Illinois, rather you could say. So it's just like every part of Cincinnati reminds me of another place that I've been, and I feel like I can get everything here on top of the rich history of Cincinnati, which is fast. I'm a little bit of a history nerd, so it's
Yeah, so
fascinating
am
for me.
I. I knew we had something in common. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little bit. I'm not a very like I'm not fact driven. Like I'm not a person who like memorizes facts, but
Mhm.
I enjoy learning about it.
Yeah, same
So
here.
yeah.
You know, when it comes to 19th century America, which is my main thing,
Hmm.
and I find, especially at the Harry Beecher Stowe House, there are people come in, they know all about the Civil War
Hmm.
battles and the people and who was there and names and dates. they know less about why there was a civil war.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with how, what things happened and it culminated in one of the worst civil wars that ever happened. So yeah. So yeah, who are the people
Yeah, that's
basically?
what I find fascinating. Like you hear about a time period, but if you explore a person's life and get to read about their emotions that they were experiencing, their family transitions, like learning about the Great Migration was one of the most fascinating things to me because when you're reading about, you hear about it and you look at it from such a distant perspective. But when you read about it, you can put yourself in, you can empathize and you can put
Yeah.
yourself in these people's shoes. And it's just like, it makes you appreciate being here and all that it took to have the society we have today
Yeah.
when you really look at the people versus just like the events.
Yeah, because I think you have to do both at once. You have to recognize individuals, people, and what Joe Blow went through,
Hmm.
and Bill Jones and Sally Smith or whatever. But at the same time, you have to look at the movement, the
Hmm.
totality. You can't look at just one or the other and really hope to get it, but both at once, maybe you get a little closer to what was going on.
I have a really controversial view of history. I feel like there is no wrong or right side of history. There's just history. It's just what was necessary to have today. It's like there is some things that, of course, I don't agree with that have
Sure.
happened, but I don't necessarily. I think it was all necessary for the betterment of for today, like for the outcome of whatever that needs to
Yeah.
be. Like I just maybe it's because I have faith. I'm a very faith driven person, so I just count it all joy. And I just look at it like, okay, this is what was necessary to create this. Does a hammer get upset that you have to hit it with a nail? You know? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, but then on the other hand, I think how many different ways could things have gone?
hmm,
If Lincoln hadn't been elected, how
yeah,
how would things be different now, and how would they be the same? We'll
yeah,
never we'll never really know.
exactly.
So, but here we are.
That's why I say it can't be a wrong or right side because we can
Yeah.
never fix we can't
Yeah,
fix it.
it is what it is. That's
Yeah.
all we can say. And
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to judge people in the past. Some deserve some
Mm.
judgment, like Hitler. I mean, there are people just
Oh yeah.
there's no
There's
other
some people
side,
that
but
require some judgment.
yeah, but for the most part, people were living how they knew to live.
Hmm.
They you can't expect them people 100, 200 years ago to have our values.
Yeah.
Our values didn't exist. How are they
Yeah.
supposed to have them? So.
Yeah.
And 200 years from now, people will be looking right here at this video and going, "What? Are they
Yeah.
crazy? That's not how you do it."
It's almost
So
like expecting people to have the values you have today can be compared to expecting them to have the technology we have today.
yeah,
We advance and we grow and we learn.
yeah,
And that's just a part of the process and just be grateful that we can learn off all those experiences from the past.
right. Yeah, I just did a podcast. I don't think I can put it out there yet about how we read books today that are about people like you and me. I've
Hmm.
written books about essentially me, um, and that's fairly typical. But 300 years ago, okay, Gutenberg develops movable type, and I discussed this with Tim some. Now it's possible to print more books less expensively, but they're still expensive.
Hmm.
And a lot of people couldn't read, so those books tended to be about kings and queens and aristocracy and major philosophies.
Hmm.
Not so much about just folks, because just folks couldn't afford the book and probably
They
couldn't read
couldn't
it
read it.
anyway.
Yeah.
But now the books are inexpensive, easily published, uh, and this goes back at least 100 years.
Hmm.
Books tend to be more about just folks
Yeah.
because just folks can afford to buy them and read them. So
Yeah.
that works. So yeah, there's a real difference there that you have to keep track of.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
changes
yeah,
the demographic of people who are interested in it because now like that's even if you just look at the black people like at one point in time we couldn't read and write so there was of course no books based
yeah,
off of for us or geared towards us and now we have our own section of the whole library and
yeah,
because of
yeah,
course the demographic has changed
yeah.
even that reminds me and puts me in the mind of Tyler Perry's story how when he
Mhm.
first started making movies, Hollywood was not at all interested in his movies. And then they found out how much money his
yeah,
movies were making.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
they started making movies geared towards African Americans because they're like, they do go to the movies. And
yeah.
they let him just become a millionaire right under their nose.
Yeah, I was going to say the only color consciousness of Hollywood is green. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I used to watch, since you brought it up, maybe you didn't know. I don't think anybody knows this except I happen to watch this one guy, Robert somebody, who's a authority on Hollywood. In the 40s, 50s, maybe the 30s, they used to make a movie, and they made a lot of movies, of course. It's before TV. They probably made more movies than now, and more people watch them. But during the day, they'd make the movie for white people, white actors,
Hmm.
and everything. During the night, they'd shoot the whole thing over again. Whatever they'd done during the day, they did it again at night with black actors. Yeah.
Never heard of such a thing.
Yeah. And they did it a lot. Uh, for obvious reasons. You showed the white version to the white audiences in the white neighborhood, and you showed the black version to the black people
I've
in the
never
black.
heard of that.
Yeah. Quite a bit. And he showed samples of it. I mean, yeah.
That's pretty cool. I've never heard of it. I'm not gonna have to look it up to see if I can
Yeah.
see some comparisons.
He's only the only way I know about it is this one guy, Robert, somebody on HBO, I think he established. Anyway, but yeah, and there's just another facet because we were more segregated. So, and I think it wasn't so much necessarily. You might disagree, and you're certainly welcome to. Not so much that white people wanted to like push black people off the edge of the cliff. They just didn't want them. Them, So sure, we'll make a black movie, and we can sell in a black neighborhood, and make money. And as white folks will have our white version of it, and I think that was more the sentiment rather than, and again, feel free to butt in on this, more the sentiment of let's just keep the separation there rather than we're trying to, hurt anybody.
It's not necessarily, they probably weren't necessarily trying to hurt anyone, but they do inadvertently end up hurting
Oh,
them
sure.
because they don't get the same opportunities. Like, because
Yeah,
I'm sure
no,
there
but
was a differentiation in
yeah,
pay between the movies that were shot with the white actors versus the movies that were shot with the black actors. And if anything, that's a direct example of that inequality because it's the same exact movie. And they're working at night. So usually third shift get paid a little bit
first,
more.
yeah,
Well, I wouldn't say that they're necessary. It was nothing wrong with it because
no, yeah,
I'm not one that really believes that integration was the best thing for African Americans. Honestly, I don't think it was the best thing. And not to say that we should be anyone should be excluded from anything, but I don't think that immersion is always the best result.
especially forced immersion. That tends
Exactly.
to create resentment.
Yeah, for anyone on either side. So I can definitely see the need for a different approach to different things. But as far as where the inequality comes in and where it's like it's not they're not trying to push them off a cliff, but it does come in when it comes to those actors bringing money home and to be able to provide for their families and the opportunities they have and the exposure they have. So it does.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting it was all equal or anything,
Hmm.
but whatever point I was
You just
making,
saying there was no
sure.
malice. You don't think it was a
No
lot of
malice,
malice
no
behind
malice.
the.
Yeah, not to say there was enough consideration, but there was no malice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm old enough to remember school busing, um, and it was a new idea and so forth. So there's nothing to compare it to, or no history to look at and see what. But I did feel at the time, and I think I was right that was a stupid way to go about leveling the playing field. Just yeah, we're not leveling the playing field. We're just butting heads here, and that's
Hmm.
supposed to work. That's the way I felt about it.
Yeah.
And I think, and you tell me.
I
But
think that when I look back on the history of schooling and like the African American history of the HBCUs and so on, I really feel like there was a lot more Black excellence when there was a difference in the schools. But I can't speak to that to how it felt to have to walk to those schools or what the obstacles may have been. But I can definitely say that I feel like there was a major decline in Black excellence when there was immersion of schools.
yeah, maybe a decline in white excellence too.
Exactly. There was a decline exactly because it's just like everyone it's not even necessarily wrong nothing wrong with going to school together if that's your choice to do so. But there's nothing wrong with having like for instance, there's all boys schools.
Okay.
Are we outraged because the girls can't go there? No, there's a purpose behind. My son
All
goes to
girls
an all
schools,
boys school. Yeah.
yeah,
So there's not, I don't think, like you said, to force anyone to do anything is never the right choice.
yeah,
But if you give people an option, usually they choose the right one
yeah,
or the right one for them and their family.
yeah. Yeah, and that brings to my mind because I mentioned Thomas Sowell sometime when we were talking. You
Mm.
didn't know who he was.
No.
I think you should check him out because he's speaking to what you're saying right now. He feels like the busing, the forced integration was a stupid mistake. Now, this is a black guy who's probably in his 90s right now. He's written a number of books, of which I've read several. And he points out that if you go general vicinity of the 1950s, there was more black excellence then than now. That there was less uh, um, unwed parenthood, I guess,
Hmm.
black or white, really.
Hmm.
That the black communities were really largely very successful.
Yeah, and family oriented,
Family
and
oriented. Not to
but a
say that
lot came into play that there was a systematic approach to that, in my opinion. Like for instance, like for me, my family, my grandmother moved from Mississippi with her children. She had two children at the time. She ended up having seven by the time she ended up in Chicago. And my grandmother's all of her children were affected by the crack epidemic, every single one of them. So, including my mother. So there was a lot of things that took place outside of the integration. Out there was a lot more attack on the African American community during different periods that affected where we are today. And I do feel like there is a lot of black excellence today. I do see that picking up. Yeah,
there's always
but
going to be. I don't care what anybody does.
yes,
There are going to be people who rise to the top.
yes. But there was like, I guess, astute. There was a little bit more. When I look at the path, I guess that's everywhere you look at. There was a little bit more conservation. Like there was a little bit more conservativeness about people in their approach to family and worship and church. It was just like there was so much unity. I feel like that has been affected, but that's
You
also been
speaking specifically of
in
the
the
black,
African American community. Yeah,
yeah.
but I feel like that was also affected through, like, every major city you look at where the highway get built, right through the African American community. It's like a lot of displacement, the crack epidemic. There's been so much that has happened. So I feel like for us to even have the level of excellence we have now is remarkable, with how much systematic attacks that the community has been under, and now the whole world, honestly, because social media is a major distraction from excellence, in
Well,
my
that's worth
opinion.
discussing because we're on social media right
Yeah.
now.
So I think social media can be a tool for good, but most people don't use the tool for good. That's just like anything that you get. When we get our free will in our hands, we can overuse that. We can use it for bad too, just as well as good.
Well, sure, but would you agree that we have to have free will? Doing good because you don't have a choice isn't really doing
No,
good.
it's not.
You know?
No, it's a
Doing good
force.
when you have a choice is doing good.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, okay, then, how do we get everybody to do good, even though they have the choice of doing bad?
I don't think we ever will be able to. I think we have to give people that choice and lead by example,
Mhm.
and not be afraid to expose ourselves to people who are not exactly like us, to give them an opportunity for change, to give them opportunity for, as an example, a mold, or I guess you could say. And I think that's the best approach to trying to get people to doing good, is just by being good yourself and exposing yourself to people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you really cannot take a club and hold a person's head and say,
No,
be good. They'll do whatever you tell them when you got a club over their hip.
no,
That does make them a good person.
no. And if you've raised children, then you know that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, and you have one child?
Two,
Two. Okay,
I have an
so,
18-year-old who's about to graduate from Moeller. He graduates this year.
okay.
And then I have a 6-year-old daughter.
Oh, great.
Hmm.
So, Jan and I each have two, and they're in their 50s. My God, how'd that happen? But anyway, um, my train of thought was, yeah, you can coerce them to some extent,
Hmm.
but mostly you have to teach them to grow to be adults, self-sufficient adults. You have to let them make their mistakes and screw up, and just try to catch them before they hit too hard when they fall, But to keep them reined in all the time, they just become adults that can't function.
Yeah. Yeah. I say for my son, my thing is I just try to give him a good foundation that he can rely on. What he builds on that foundation can always be torn down and rebuilt as long as the foundation is good.
Great way to put it.
So that's what I try to do with him is give him the tools. And if he chooses to build a shack instead of a house, then at least the foundation is good and we can later build the house.
Yeah.
That's what I try because I can't control everything.
Yeah, and I think that's a good metaphor considering I don't know if the 20-year-old has ever existed. Who everything they thought at 20, they still thought at 30.
Exactly.
All the plans they were going to make, a lot of times they're out the window. I can say that for myself and almost anybody I've ever known. So yeah, give them the foundation and they'll build and rebuild and move this like that, whatever. But they have the foundation, they can do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my goal with my kids, at least. I cannot determine. I always say Hitler had a mom. That's what I tell myself. You never know. I don't know. I never read into his history but every bad person, every good person had a mom and a dad, and I'm sure that they did not. I'm sure Jeffrey Dahmer's mom was not proud. I'm sure.
Yeah, and I know a little bit about Hitler's background, and not surprisingly, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I think his father was an alcoholic. I'm not sure, but yeah, he had a crappy background, and the question is, if parents raise their children well, whatever that means, can they become a bad person regardless? And you raise it. I don't think they can entirely. I'll go the other way though. Say if a person has terrible parents, I've seen people get past that and become good people. So I know that can be done. Not necessarily easy, and they shouldn't have to do it, but
Yeah.
it can be done.
I just try to do the best, and like I said, just worry about the foundation, the part I can build. Those are the beginning years. Then everything after that, you just have to pray.
Okay, well, here's the trick question: what is that foundation made out of?
Faith, family, sacrifice, communication, prayer.
Certain amount of prayer.
Exactly. So that's for my family, at least. That's what it looks like.
That sounds like it to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And definitely the understanding of sacrifice, especially in today's time, because it's a lot of entitlement when it comes to the younger generations, especially with social media. It can make everyone think that everyone's living this rich life, or everyone's getting whatever they want whenever they want. So the big thing for me was making sure my son understood sacrifice and understood what it takes to truly make it, and not what it takes to look like you're making it.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest challenge for me. And I'm thinking it's going to be a little harder for my daughter because she's really coming into the social media age. Like, she's only 6. But for my son, that was the most difficult thing to drill into his head, is understanding the meaning of sacrifice and what it really took to make it versus looking like you're making it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what a lot of parents are, hopefully they're aware of.
Yeah. And I just would add to that, you have to sacrifice today to have a better tomorrow. If you make it all about today, by the time tomorrow comes, you're in deep doo-doo. You should have been planning on tomorrow. Yeah.
And too many people are okay with just planning for tomorrow because tomorrow is what makes them look good. And then it's the next tomorrow. And then they just fall off the face of the earth because they feel like they can't front anymore. Yeah. So I'm trying to make sure that my kids understand that you can have what you want in life, but you may not be able to have it tomorrow.
Well, and there's that too. If life hands you lemons, you got to make the lemonade, whatever that really means. You can't presume. Nobody knows the number of their days and so forth, or even knows what their situation will be. So you have to have the foundation that you can still handle things.
Yeah. And those were not all tools that I learned. Those are things I had to learn growing up and stumbling through life on my own. And so I'm trying to just make sure that they don't have the same consequences.
Well, okay. I think there's something there that you said that I'd like to try to get a hold of in my own mind. Excuse me. You apparently didn't grow up in the best of situations, but you're trying to create the best of situations for your kids.
Yes.
It sounds like you're doing it. How did you do it? How did you come from where you were and end up where you are?
Creating new family, honestly. Allowing people, like I said, when I was speaking on how the best way to impact people is being a good person yourself and exposing yourself to the world. I believe in that because that's what people did for me. they exposed themselves to me and allowed me into their lives so that I can have, and they didn't know what they were doing. They were just being good people. But that exposure allowed me to have another view of what life could be.
Is this like early in your life?
It started, honestly, when I had my son at 19, and then I started working in hospice as a home health aide. And I worked for a company in Wisconsin where I would go to palliative care patients and hospice patients and help them take baths. Basically, I was a bath aide. And what that did was bring me to a lot of suburban areas where I would go into these houses that were nothing like what I came from. And I got to know people intimately because I'm there at the time of hospice and I'm in their homes. And a lot of these people, I ended up finding private duty care through that. And so I would work my job, and then a lot of time I would be hired out to work and work for them privately as well. So a lot of these families I got to know very intimately. And through knowing me and knowing I had a child, I was grateful that a lot of these people took interest in my life and they exposed me to how to manage my finances, how to grow in my faith, how to just be a better person. Not to say I was a bad person, but I just did not have a lot of exposure to good things. So I was pretty rough around the edges, if one must say. But I had good bones, good, I had, and I think people saw that and they exposed themselves to me and took a risk at doing so. And I learned so much through that. I learned so much by just being a part of a family for temporary times.
Well, then let me just, could you say that? And I instantly think, but there are other people, maybe not exactly, very close to your situation
Mhm.
that didn't accomplish much of anything or get anywhere. Are you different? Was the situation only? Is what was
There's
different?
also a lot of people that were in my exact situation that have done much better.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's like it's both ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and it's.
And what I'm getting at, can you explain why?
I think why would be my willingness to listen, my willingness to be influenced, and my desperation for wanting to be better. And I can't tell you why that existed in me. I just am grateful that it did. But my desperation, I was desperate to be a better person and not to fall into the traps of my surroundings.
Okay, I'd
And
like to cut in there and don't want to open any old wound, but
no, you're
when you
fine.
say desperate, what was the situation?
Well, for me, I had my son at 19, and his father was significantly older than me, and that wasn't a good situation. He ended up becoming incarcerated while I was pregnant, and I was on my own. And I came from, my mom had 4 children in total. We were in and out of foster care my whole life. So my grandmother and my sisters would do what they could for us and take us in when they could. But there was times where we lived with strangers. There was times where I lived with friends, and it was just rough. I had no stability in my childhood at all. And my mom was in and out of prison my whole life. It was just rough. It was just anything you could think of that can happen when you have a vulnerable young girl has happened to me. And so when I had my son, I knew that this is a life that I'm responsible for, and I don't want him to have the outcomes that I had in life. So that's where that desperation came from. I was desperate to give him a better chance than what I had, and desperate for him to not have the memories that I had, to not have the experiences that I had. And there's a lot of beauty in my life too, my childhood. Like my grandmother was an amazing woman, and so my siblings are very loving and they're amazing as well, but they are also affected by our childhood. And so just wanting to be better and wanting to give. My sisters had children young. Both of my sisters had children at 15. So seeing that and just having all of these nieces and nephews, and I've always been a reader. I've always been a little bit of a introvert, just kind of like to myself. And I've always observed the world in a different way. I can't really explain why that is.
Different drummer, whatever.
Yeah. So I just wanted to help my family out of that, like, and be an example for my nieces and nephews, and especially having my own child. Then it was like, okay, I have to figure this out because this is not how I want I didn't like it.
Hmm.
When I was a kid, I used to be afraid to turn 18. That's how aware I was of how hard it was out here and how tuned in I was to just
Okay,
hardship.
because when you say turn 18, you were out of the system when you hit 18. Is that what you're getting at? Or
Yeah, out of the system, out of the not only just out of the system, but out of the hands of anyone. I always felt like a burden because no one ever had the means to provide for us. So I knew they were only doing it because I was a child. And so I was afraid that when I became 18 that I would like be homeless because the only reason why people would take me in is because I was a child or because I cleaned their house or because I was responsible and so I would be like their cleaner or babysitter or whatever they needed. And I was afraid that that would not be available to me when I turned 18 and that I would be living like my sisters who were struggling, who are wonderful people, but they were struggling. They had children and they were struggling. And that's the only future I was exposed to. The only future I was exposed to is maybe getting an apartment and struggling, and having kids. So I was afraid that that was the only outcome I could have. And so when I did become pregnant my senior year of high school and I did have a child, that's the only future I would have known if it hadn't have been for me getting that job where I started traveling and going to suburban areas and other areas and just working in these homes. And these people, instead of a lot of them did judge me, but a lot of them took interest in me and helped me and guided me. And I'm grateful to that. And even to this day, like I've joined the Catholic Church and I have a lot of people who have became family.
Mhm.
And I'm very grateful to them. And it taught me that exposure matters. Like letting people see who you are matters because people allowing me to see who they are and allowing me in and not being afraid of me getting close is the only reason why I am who I am today and the only reason why my son is about to graduate from Moeller High School and the only reason why I have an amazing 6-year-old daughter and I'm doing poetry and it's like and I'm doing working with youth and it's all because someone was willing to show me their heart. They were willing to show me who they are and truly let me in. Not pat me on my back, not give me a couple dollars and send me on my way, but truly allow me in and allow me to make a mess and then help me clean it up.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you would have your own versions of what I'm saying. Yeah, but so many people, oh, they want to say the right thing, have the right opinion, and I'm not sure they even know who exactly they are, but I sure don't. So
No.
but I'm so much more responsive to people. I would rather respond to a person that I totally disagree with, who is genuine,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be genuine with them, and we can just disagree to our heart's content, than to just trade platitudes with people who I'm not even sure who they really are, or if they even have a
Just
sentiment.
dogmatic.
Yeah, 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 dogmatic or just okay, dogmatic, but so many people are like, here's how I'm supposed to be. Here's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do. Here's the job I'm supposed to have. Here's the religion I'm supposed to, believe in. And I'm not knocking religion, but just following a path that they think has been set
Mm-hmm.
for them that they're supposed to follow. And as long as they're on that path, then hey, they're doing their job, I guess. Because I was faced with something at 27, nothing like you, but I was a teacher for 6 years and I saw my entire future right in front of me, straight line. Uh, it was a perfectly good future. And I thought, but what part of that is me? You know?
Or what part is that of me pleasing the people who
Yeah. And these
yeah.
were bad, whatever expectations people had of me, they weren't bad expectations. And then when they
They just
can,
weren't yours.
right. I was just following a path, not blazing my own trail, not discovering myself, just,
Mm-hmm.
doing what I'm supposed to do. And a lot of people do that. I don't knock them for that, but I think one of them, because I wrestled with it. There you are, the kind of a balancing point of, hey, I am set for life.
Mm-hmm.
What's not to like about that? Or I can check it all and just go off into the wilderness and see what happens. And I had to really talk myself into the wilderness part, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I did. And I'm kind of still in the wilderness and
Yeah.
still enjoying it,
Yeah.
So yeah.
I can relate to that wholeheartedly because I struggled with that as well when, especially choosing to do poetry and everything I do surrounding or connected to it in some sort of way. Um,
I think I see what Zinnia and I have in common. We're both individualists. We'd rather find our own way in our own lives than follow a path or let people tell us how we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to think. Oh, and speaking of individualists, that's right. 2084, The Reawakening, really is about an individualist who doesn't even know that's what he is, but he's trying to figure out why he doesn't fit in. And that's because he's not like all those other people. And he goes looking for other people like him. And spoiler alert, he finds them. So take a look at 2084, The Reawakening, available on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Thank you.